Thank you, Erica. 안녕하세요. 만나서 반갑습니다. 켄트입니다. My name is Kent, and today's talk is about DAOs. DAOs Demystified, lessons from 18 months on the DAO frontier. Quick show of hands, who is currently involved in a DAO right now? Okay, cool. Wow, this is actually a good crowd. Who is maybe thinking about joining a DAO in some way? Kind of vetting a DAO, okay. And who's actually thinking about creating a DAO themselves? Awesome. Well, for everybody, and then even if you're not too familiar with DAOs, I'm hoping to add some value with this talk. So we have a good amount of ground to cover, so let's dig right in. A little bit more about myself. I started the Ethereum Denver community back in the day, and I'm an ETH Denver steward. Probably saw some of you at ETH Denver this February. It's always a good time. I used to be the head of R&D at ShapeShift, and I'm currently the Tokenomics Workstream leader at ShapeShift DAO. So a little quick context about ShapeShift, because we've had a very unique journey. ShapeShift used to be a centralized crypto exchange, but non-custodial, so we didn't hold on to your funds. And we had a hell of a product market fit back in the ICO bubble. People loved ShapeShift because they didn't have to KYC, it was very frictionless. However, we had to abandon that business model for regulatory reasons. The writing on the wall was pretty clear, so we got rid of that. Kind of independently from that, we also decided to really, truly embrace the crypto ethos. We've always been very much about the cypherpunk values of crypto and actually become a DAO. This was about mid-2021 we shifted to being a DAO. So we've been on the front lines of, building this stuff, kind of making it up as we go along for the past year and a half or so. I joined the DAO in late 2021. And that's kind of the TLDR on ShapeShift. So here's what today's talk is going to be about. Here's the premise. Basically, incredible new superpowers have been unlocked by DAOs. However, corresponding challenges arise from the use of those superpowers. So the idea here is let's explore some of those real-life lessons and how to address those challenges based on our learnings that we've had at ShapeShift. Because again, this is kind of the first iteration of DAOs, and I really hope that our lessons can maybe create an easier path for those that are building subsequently. So one thing, just before we get in, this shit is really important. It's extremely important that we get this right. DAOs offer a better path forward relative to what we've had. When you think about our current centralized institutions, they often have an incentive to divide humans, to pit humans against one another in an artificial way. And this is just how things have been for a long time. There's so many examples of this. Finally, thanks to crypto, we have alternatives. We don't need institutions for a trust layer and for a credibly neutral platform. There's all these wonderful benefits. DAOs are a wonderful embodiment of that. However, it's very early on. If we don't get this right, then perhaps the full promise won't be fulfilled. But I firmly believe that a brighter, more just, more prosperous, and more peaceful humanity lies down our path, or there's a better chance of it happening if we can get this right with DAOs. So that said, why do it? Why DAO it? This is a pretty sophisticated audience, so I won't cover a ton of basics here. But at like a high level, why are we doing this? DAOs hold incredible promise because they leverage the unique properties of blockchains to empower humans to build, collaborate, and coordinate in ways that were, up to this point, impossible. We're only just beginning to understand the potential of this new socioeconomic primitive or technology. I asked ChatGPT about some of the benefits of DAOs, and it spat out this list, which is actually pretty good. It's pretty comprehensive. We're actually going to touch on some of these shortly here. The reduced bureaucracy is actually something that's I think ShapeShift has gotten right, and I want to explain that briefly because we've done a good job with this, I think. Some people get the idea with DAOs that it's just kind of anarchy. Like, okay, you have a governance token and people are voting on everything, but it's like there's no leaders and it's kind of a mess. In fact, it doesn't have to be that way. At ShapeShift, we have a really effective organizational structure where Workstream leaders are elected via community governance. People vote on Workstream leaders. I am a workstream leader for Tokenomics. There's marketing workstream leader, engineering, moderation, and so on. These people have the ability within the confines of their workstream to do a lot of things. You know, like manage the people under them and do different things with the budget. So even though there's no like C-suite level, CEO, CFO type thing, there are people who are kind of like helping create more focus, and this has been quite helpful. And yeah, there's some other stuff here too. Of course, I'm not here to tell you what you can learn on ChatGPT. I wanna really explain kind of stuff we've learned from dealing with this stuff firsthand. Just one more thing to really couch this, and this is again this is the crux of it all. This is why we do crypto, guys. The properties of decentralization. Let's just briefly talk about that. Permissionlessness. Anyone, anywhere can build a DAO, and any token holder can participate in its governance. Transparency, we're going to dig into this for sure. The entirety of a DAO's finances and governance could be on chain for all to see. And finally, this beautiful censorship resistance. No individual or institution can interfere with the DAO's on-chain operations. These are incredibly powerful qualities to have. Just as a brief aside, beware of what I like to call dinos. So these are like DAOs in name only or decentralized in name only. So you see a lot of these days. And these are, you know, it's like any new technology. Some people are coming in, leveraging this buzzword and say, oh yeah, we're a DAO, this is great. But in fact, it's only like, you know, one or two people who are like calling all the shots, and maybe like, you know, one or two people holding most of the governance tokens, and they don't embody these crypto values at all. Sometimes it's just a straight up money grab. Other times, some of these dinos, they mean well, but they need some prodding in that direction towards decentralization. They're maybe not quite getting it. So whether you're looking at maybe joining a DAO or, you know, getting involved some way, kind of keep an eye out for these dinos because they're out there, and I think there's going to be even more of them as this technology spreads. Remember, decentralization is the point. So let's talk about superpowers. Borderless participation is a wonderful superpower. So here's a cool story from ShapeShift. During our centralized days, this is back in 2017, 2018, Solidity developers were even harder to find than they are now, like a true unicorn, so hard to find. We actually found some, I think it was 2 developers in France that were an amazing fit, super talented people. The problem is, if anybody is familiar with French labor laws, it's really hard to hire people from France. There's a lot of bureaucratic red tape. And the real reason it's hard to hire is because it's extremely hard to fire somebody based on their laws if something goes wrong, you know, if it's not a good fit. So it's a big disincentive not to go that route. So we couldn't actually do that. Fast forward to the DAO, it's a different type of setup. It's a different type of paradigm. You know, we're not having to worry about these sort of things because anybody can just self-select, voluntarily join the DAO. And it's amazing, actually. We have contributors from Brazil, Australia, the States, Europe, including France. Like, we actually have a French developer, and he's a complete rock star. So what a wonderful contrast to, you know, this way of doing things before. And that is just one example of this nice, you know, borderless participation. It's quite powerful. But there is kind of like a potential downside here. Sometimes you find yourself wishing that you actually had an HR department. So, you know, as nice as it is to not deal with corporate bureaucracy, or I think everybody's seen the movie Office Space. You know, everybody hates that, you know, HR. But the thing is, once in a while things can go wrong, and you almost wish you had an HR department. So here's what happened at ShapeShift. The bear market really hit, you know, was really taking hold last year. And it became apparent some contributors weren't really pulling their weight. They were not doing a good job. Maybe not being present at the DAO, not really showing up. In some cases, just kind of being a jerk or being a bit trollish. So this became kind of an issue, and I remember thinking multiple times as this whole thing unfolded, dude, if this was a centralized company, these people would have been gone 3 months ago. Like, this is ridiculous. The problem was the DAO did not have a process for really dealing with people that aren't really contributing. And to be clear, this is not like a common thing, but I think with any organization, you will have these edge cases of people maybe just who aren't a good fit or aren't doing a good job. So how we dealt with it, and this is kind of the learning, and this takes a bit of a page from just the centralized playbook, but like set clear success metrics for all leadership roles. Maybe contributor role is true, but especially leadership roles. There should be a very clear set of criteria that leaders are beholden to, because they really set the tone and tenor for the entire organization and its strategy. And that way, if they're not doing well, if they're not actually doing what they said they would, then it's easy for the community to hold them accountable. Another good thing on a related note is to use leadership and contributor terms of 3 to 6 months. I've seen either work. They can be pretty effective. I would really hesitate to have terms for these roles of more than 6 months. Like 6 months is like, in crypto, is like 6 years in real time. You know, six months, you go beyond that, a lot could happen. So much like, you know, elections in a democracy, this is a regular touch point for the community to weigh in and see, you know, how is somebody doing. And this has been pretty effective for us. Finally, you know, there's always the last resort threat of using community governance to actually vote somebody off the island, so to speak. And it turns out we didn't really need that. Usually the sort of notion that this is possible will encourage somebody to either shape up or maybe voluntarily leave for another direction. But just knowing that that's kind of an option is pretty powerful. In the case of ShapeShift, those contributors did find different paths, and you know, it was a good learning experience for us. Superpower number 2, ease of launch. So launching a DAO is so much more frictionless than when you, in many ways, compared to its sort of traditional counterparts. So you know, you don't need tons of seed capital. You don't need to worry about maybe overhead. You're tapping into truly, as we just saw, like a global talent pool. Tokenomic incentives can kind of give rise to interesting business models. So this is actually really interesting. As I mentioned, ShapeShift did have a bit of a unique experience in the sense that we actually started out centralized and then became centralized or decentralized. But even then, like, we were able to take advantage of all these wonderful you know, tools that exist, like things like Colony on Gnosis Chain for payroll, Snapshot for governance and other things, and it really is quite easy. So, and you know, we've seen this time and again where DAOs will just pop up almost overnight for like different reasons, and people flock to them, and that's very nice. However, the related challenge with this superpower is it's actually so easy that DAOs often launch without thinking everything through. They don't think through all the little details, and this can lead to ambiguity, confusion, and maybe suboptimal design choices around all sorts of stuff. So we actually experienced this firsthand at ShapeShift, where I mentioned our organizational structure, where we had Workstream leaders that had the ability to do all sorts of things. So during the bear market, as it hit, some Workstream leaders decided to make budget cuts because they had the ability to do that under their tokenomics or under their Workstream, whatever that Workstream was. However, after they laid people off, some members of the community pushed back and said, wait a minute, guys, you don't actually have the ability or the right to do this based on our structure. We kind of went back and looked at the DAO's founding documents, and those people were right. Like, it was actually pretty ambiguous. So we had a question of, like, do Workstream leaders really have the ability to hire and fire however they see fit? What did we do? Like, a bit of a tough question there. The way we solved it is we fixed it in governance. We addressed it in governance. So we had this wonderful open debate, a contentious yet respectful debate about how to solve this issue. And after a lot, I think we talked about this for a good month or so. You know, it's some big important stuff, big picture shit. But in the end, the community decided to vote in a proposal that clarified it and said that yes, in fact, Workstream leaders do have the autonomy to hire and fire anybody under the Workstream as they see fit. So in this case, we were able to clarify with governance. But I think the lesson here, especially for newer DAOs that haven't launched yet, really take your time thinking about the foundational stuff. You know, stuff like tokenomics, governance, the business model, or whatever your mission is. That's very important. but also think through like the little details. Think through the weird edge cases, because these will arise. And the more you get this stuff taken care of at the beginning, the less you have to worry about maybe addressing things down the road, because problems will pop up. In terms of governance, ShapeShift is pretty straightforward. We have our off-chain and on-chain layer. But one thing I think we get right that I would recommend, certainly for other DAOs, is to always have constant communication about what's happening for governance. So we have weekly governance chats at the DAO that are usually pretty well attended, where we can talk about all these things. People talking through proposals, or people have made a proposal can sort of bring that to the community, talk about why they're doing it. We can have debates about it. And that regular communication is a really nice thing to have. And then, of course, there's the on-chain component, your snapshot or what have you. But governance, of course, is the lifeblood of DAOs, and ideally with a good token, even token distribution, rather than concentrated in just a few people. All right, so this is one of my favorites. I don't know how this saying would translate into Korean necessarily. Maybe there's a similar saying, but in English we say sunlight is the best disinfectant. So in other words, there's a lot of stuff that can be hidden in the shadows, but when everything is open to the beautiful sunlight of transparency and for all to see, you tend to have better outcomes. So this, of course, relates to the on-chain sort of transparency. We actually just heard a little bit about this, or a lot about it, from Marta with Masari, and this actually relates so well. I was excited to see that presentation before. Transparency, I think, is one of the most important superpowers of DAOs. This is actually very, very near and dear to my heart. Believe it or not, but Bitcoin Magazine used to not be a maximalist publication. They used to be very open-minded. This is back before like Ethereum even launched. But back in like early 2014, I wrote this article called, talking about real-time transparency, talking basically about how things would really change once organizations and businesses were able to have the entirety of their finances and all their activity on-chain in a way that was completely auditable and verifiable and on a block-by-block basis. Like, what a stunning contrast to the way things have been done before in terms of having to wait for quarterly reports. And even then, there's all sorts of risk that might be hidden. Hidden risk is everywhere. We saw this. Of course, this wasn't a surprise when everything blew up, but we saw this in the crypto space with FTX and all the centralized lending. It was opaque. It was not decentralized, and what do you know? It blew up. But we've certainly seen plenty of this in the TradFi space as well. Arguably the 2008 financial crisis, there was hidden risk everywhere in terms of mortgage-backed securities. It almost brought down the entire freaking world economy. And of course, the lack of transparency also presents problems with respect to corruption in politics. Nonprofits suffer from a lack of this. In the corporate world, it's everywhere. So it's really good stuff, this on-chain transparency. There is a bit of a downside, though, and that's the fact that maximal transparency can be confusing, or maybe even misleading if somebody wanted to play it that way. What I mean is there's a ton of data out there, and we saw some of that in the Masari presentation. There's a lot going on, and even though you can sort of, if a motivated person wants to see what's going on, they can look on chain. It becomes difficult sometimes with so much data. What do you do with all this stuff? There's a saying like analysis paralysis. Like, I'm just overwhelmed with all these numbers. So at ShapeShift, we solved this with what I like to call a dashboard. This was built by an amazing DAO contributor named Darwin, and I'm just so proud of what we have at the DAO here. So the naive and easy way to go about this is like point somebody to your mainnet treasury or wherever most of your finances or assets are, and say, yep, there it is. And that's cool. But in many cases, for DAOs, all sorts of different projects, it's much more complex than that. For instance, at ShapeShift, the DAO has positions in DeFi and like LP tokens. It has assets over on Gnosis chain, which is used to handle like payroll to contributors, and it gets complex. So the thought is wouldn't it be nice if you could just easily access all this data in a nice, easy to digest way? And this is what these dashboards are about. You can see the current up-to-date status of everything. You can see where these assets are located. Verify that yourself. There's also dashboards for revenue and expenses and things like that. And this is really a great way of leveraging that superpower, I think, because it takes away that ambiguity. We also maintain a runway spreadsheet. As with most startups, or crypto projects, there's a very finite runway. Right now, ShapeShift has about 8 to 9 months of runway. It's been that way for a while. But these, again, nobody should ever be wondering, well, like, how much longer is this thing going to last? Like, there should never, that's like one of the most important fundamental things, and it should be very transparent and clear. This is what we often talk about in tokenomics, is just the status of the runway for all to see. Really quick brief note, the USDC unpeg, that was like an insane weekend. I don't know if you guys remember, but like one of these things that everybody took for granted, the USDC holding its peg, all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, what do we do now? ShapeShift actually held most of its treasury in USDC at the time, and it was very much a wake-up call of like, this is actually some risk we didn't even really count on here, we didn't expect. So in response to that, the DAO has decided to diversify into some of its treasury into both USDT and LUSD, and this is a way to mitigate the threat and not to have the eggs all in one basket. Finally, relentless and crystal clear communication about tokenomics stuff, about everything we just talked about. I lead a call every week where we talk about all the details, we talk about the little nuances, people can ask questions. There is not a stone left unturned. Everything is out in the open, and the whole community can weigh in and ask questions. As opposed to some sort of, what a contrast to like the proverbial, excuse me, smoke-filled room where like a couple, C-level executives are talking about this and it's hush-hush. It's like, no way, this is the opposite of that approach. It's all out in the open and it's beautiful. So let's go back to ChatGPT, other challenges, and these are, we've seen a lot of these for sure. I'm not gonna, any of these could be its own talk, really. And again, I'm not here to just tell you stuff you can learn on ChatGPT, but there are quite a lot of other challenges. So one big point here is that DAOs don't magically create a global utopia. Like, it's not like just taking a project and being a DAO makes it successful. There's a lot of hard work to be done. So even though all these superpowers are wonderful, the onus is still on the people with the DAO to build, awesome stuff. So a thriving and sustainable community. That's a nice to have. It sounds great. But the reality is, if you're a DAO, people are often like maybe not quite sure about whether to join or, especially in a bear market, it's really tough out on the frontier. In addition to creating a resource-scarce environment, people are also just kind of down on crypto. People who would otherwise join a DAO are like, well, the media is telling me crypto is a scam and they don't join. So you don't necessarily have that critical mass. We do have a wonderful community at ShapeShift, and I'm very proud of it. But it is a challenge, like getting more people involved. That's just how it is right now. Ideally, everybody kind of joins behind a shared mission. Yes, we're building this. It's awesome. And you do see this with like some DeFi projects that have a really good, they have a really good focus and they're successful as everybody rallies behind something, and it's great. But in reality, decentralized consensus is hard. And I mean this in the sense of the off-chain, like the social layer of consensus, not on-chain consensus. But at ShapeShift, we're actually still fighting to find a good product market fit. We have to have very important conversations about strategy, tactics, things like that. And there really isn't like it's not like there's a CEO that's going to say, hey, this is what you should do. So as we wrap up here, I think this is one of the most important things because the lifeblood of a DAO is its decentralized community. So what do you do? How do you take advantage of that? Embrace disagreement. Always foster civil discourse and respectful debate. You want people to be having disagreements about stuff respectfully. Of course, if people are getting very trollish, yes, that's bad. But you want to create an environment where minority opinions are encouraged to be spread. On a similar note, groupthink can be deadly. So if people are starting to become sort of like sheep and being like, yes, we're doing this, and at the same time, very dismissive of people that have other ideas, that can be truly deadly to a project, because some of those minority opinions might be the ones that could really make a difference. So always discourage groupthink. Finally, better to deal with occasional borderline trolls than stifle minority opinion. In other words, if somebody's kind of a little bit of a jerk, but they're raising good points, perhaps they might want to, that might want to be encouraged. So that's it. Final note, remember why we're doing this. Centralized institutions are incentivized to divide humans against each other. This is wrong. Decentralization, crypto, and DAOs provide a path forward for us to build a more prosperous, fair, and beautiful humanity. And I look forward to building that alongside all of you in the DAO space. 감사합니다. Thank you very much.